My name is Bruce Mitchell, and my principal work is wood sculpture, and I work in paper as well. From my early experience, I had the great pleasure to work with J.B. Blunk, who's a wood sculptor who lived here in Inverness. And from that experience, I learned about visualizing in 3 dimensions. And that's been kind of the central focus of especially my sculptural work. And he also mentioned something in an interview that he had at the Williams Museum retrospective of his work several years ago, where he said he looks for an inherent form within the wood. And because of the stumps and burls and logs and things that he used and I've used as well, you have all these weird shapes that aren't like lumber from a lumber yard. There are these anomalies that have all kinds of character to them that suggest ideas. And so I'm looking for those ideas that is alive within the material, and then I find a place to begin. And that's really one of the crucial parts of creating work from wild pieces of wood, is that starting point, and knowing where to stop so that the work doesn't look like it's too forced or overdone. So those are key things that have become part of my textbook of experience that I bring to every new piece. I draw so much inspiration from nature because nature is full of abstractions and color. I grew up in a household, both my parents were UC grads and were well-read, had lots of books, periodicals, music, and of all kinds. And we went to museums and shows and things, and we were living down in the San Joaquin Valley, a couple 100 miles south of San Francisco, where my grandmother lived. And when I was 10 years old, we all drove up to see her and the Van Gogh retrospective at the De Young Museum. This was 1960. There's one painting of purple irises, and little did we know that he painted that between breakfast and lunch on the same day. And that's how, I mean, he was just ferocious. I mean, there was so much just trapped within him that just was coming out, and in such an extraordinary way. You know, moments like that were just so seminal in terms of sort of clicking that circuit of curiosity and just the sense of wonder at what the power that was in those paintings, especially seeing real ones and not just in a monograph on a table. But in subsequent visits to the De Young, we just go see the oceanic art, the African art, the Northwest Coast, the European. It was so much was there to see and just take in. And I think that was key to how I looked at art and just see the world itself. And I feel really fortunate that I had that experience, because I think it just was the springboard for me. Little did I know. It's really kind of difficult to say how deeply it had an effect on me and set the stage for me. It wasn't until I was just out of high school when I started carving little things, and that led to my introduction to J.B. Blunk and working with him part-time on public and private commissions, and then taking off and starting on my own. It just was one thing naturally led to the next. The name of my exhibition is 1 times 3. And after lots of conjugations and permutations of other names that really kind of spoke to the 3 different mediums that I'm going to be presenting, it just jumped out. And those things are they do that. It's like dreamscapes. They have their own agendas, their own scripts that change constantly, and you just never know where they're going to go. And this was just something that happened at breakfast a couple mornings ago, and I said it to my wife, and she said, "That's it." So I rely on my wife, Nancy Hemingway, a great deal for editing and approval ratings and so forth. One of the things that I really hope people will see is that I haven't set any limits on myself in terms of forms or genres. And I think that's been the thing that has kept my curiosity going, is that I just feel like I'm responding to ideas that just come. And I want to give them credit for being there because they're coming from that whole place of dream worlds and archetypes that are analogous to so many different cultures around the world, especially when you think of something just like indigo fabric. Cultures that are tens of thousands of miles apart found different plants to produce the same thing, all by themselves. And so, in a sense, it's kind of an analogy for me that I've studied so many different art forms from cultures all around the world that just say, oh, that's just the beauty of it, and maybe the function of it, its cosmological history that brought it into being from creation myths. They all have validity as far as my work is concerned. And if I have an idea that really seems tempting enough, then I'm going to pursue it. And especially on the sculptural vessels that I did a lot of for 15 years, just came out of the work I did with J.B. Blunk sculpturally, because I started to make bowls on a wood lathe that were very shaped basically so much by the machine itself and the spinning concentric quality that it gives. But when someone said, you know, your work looks a lot like Bob Stocksdale's work, who is world famous, National Geographic. I mean, he really put wood turning on the map internationally. And I said, well, that seat on the bus is already taken. So I started making the walls of these vessels thicker so that I could carve into them like I had been carving with JB. And it just took off. I created a niche for myself that was, I mean, my work's in over a dozen museums just from that genre of being willing to explore something different. And I think that's something that I'm just continuing to take with these kimonos that I started doing 7 years ago, and a whole new group of them now. And so I just wanted to really kind of show people the range of what's possible, not just for me, but for them as well. When people come to see my work at an exhibition, my greatest desire is that they discover something of their very own, and that they respond to it in a way that I have in the creation of it, but also bringing their whole lives and experience and looking at art, music, dance, whatever things that stimulate them in that way, that they'll have their own experience. And that's really important to me, because I know what my experience has been, the whole delight of something up here, and working and I've over the years I found that with working with solid pieces of wood, there's negative spaces and positive spaces that are constantly changing as you work on it, on the object. So I'm constantly rotating a piece to see how what I've done on one side affects the other side. So it's a thing that's germinating all the time as the piece evolves. And so even though the work is finished, it's kind of static as it's sitting there on that pedestal in the gallery. I think people who spend time with something, that's what I want them to do, and have that something like the experience I had working on it, that they can it will resonate with them, and just give them the kind of joy that I had in the making of the piece. And I remember being at the gallery sitting a couple of weeks ago, and a young girl, about 10, 11 years old, came in all by herself. I think her parents were around the corner at another store. And she asked me about the paintings. And so I got up and we just had this conversation for like 15 minutes, just the two of us, no one else in the gallery. And it really kind of spoke to how art can really take you to another place of wonder, curiosity, and to see that sort of blooming in this young person whose parents obviously, it turned out later her mom's an interior designer when they came in. That's really, to me, what art is all about, that communication that goes beyond the object itself.